Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. It's time for our first guest on this week's Live from the Heartland for the week of July 11th. And our guest today, our first guest, is the one and only Jesus Chuy Garcia, a longtime activist here in Chicago, a longtime politician, a wonderful guy, and it's always great to talk to him, particularly when I can get him to pull over on the side of the road and do a little bit of a Zoom. So where are you parked at, Chuy?
Good morning. Delighted to join you, Michael. I am parked in front of the beautiful Frederick Douglass Park, in between the South Lawndale and North Lawndale communities on Route 66, Ogden Avenue, in a nice shady spot. I just got here, and it's a great place to be able to do the show.
Great. Well, let's start off with something that's not so good, not as good as this show, not as good as you and me, but that vote, that terrible bill that Trump people call the big, beautiful something or other. We know it's the terrible, terrible something. How about giving us a little bit of an overview about what it came down to, how you couldn't get any more Republicans to switch, and what it means for the masses of people here in this country and beyond?
Absolutely. This is a terrible bill. That's why we call it the one big, ugly bill. It's a reconciliation bill, basically a tax bill that produces the largest transfer of wealth from working people, from poor people, from the middle class to the 1% in our country in the form of tax breaks that amount to about $1 trillion, so that the richest people in our country, big corporations, can continue to have tax breaks at the expense of, you guessed it, working people, poor people, people with disabilities, etc. The implications of this are as follows. The $1 trillion in tax breaks that have now been made permanent. They weren't permanent. They were expiring this year, have been renewed, and as a result have been made permanent. So this transference of wealth will continue until Congress puts an end to it, hopefully when we regain a majority of sane people in the U.S. Congress. But the cost of this great subsidy, this financing of the super wealthy in our country, comes from working people. The biggest chunk of money of the savings for the big ugly bill come from knocking off about 17 million people from their Medicaid benefits. That will begin in right after the midterm elections at the end of 2026. That is one of the most draconian actions ever taken against working people. It will affect children. It will affect people with disabilities. It will affect the elderly as well. And it's going to affect hospitals and nursing homes and clinics. As a matter of fact, it is likely to devastate rural health care in the reddest of states across the South, and where Donald Trump got some of his biggest vote margins as well. It's going to devastate state budgets. Governors, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are going to be hurting and trying to make ends meet and have the states step up to meet the demand for providing health care. So it's going to kick people off of their Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And then secondly, about 40 million Americans are going to experience cuts in their food nutrition programs, also known as SNAP, or as you and I used to call it, food stamps, Michael. This will affect every state across the country, and this is how we are financing the subsidizing of tax breaks for the rich in the USA. One other thing I want to add, because I know that your listeners care much about this. in this bill, we now will finance the military-industrial complex through the military budget, the Department of Defense, for over $1 trillion a year. This is more money than the Department of Defense asked for in the first place. So these are the hits that are coming to ordinary people across the country. They are severe. And we haven't even talked about immigration. I'm going to let you ask that question. But the unprecedented amount of funding that has been appropriated for the surveillance, for the apprehension, for the racial profiling of immigrants, and then the mass incarceration, mass detention. Some people are calling them concentration camps that are being built. Some, of course, the most recent in Florida, the Alcatraz prison, Alcatraz crocodile prison. There is just one example of the cruelty and the threat against Americans that will continue because this bill will fund the draconian, unprecedented measures that are likely to follow in the coming weeks and months and years.
Chuy, let me be clear. Is there, I know they had a lot of sneaky stuff in this bill, like a lot of the pain that people will feel won't happen until after the 2026 election. And I'm just wondering is if we get the Congress, can we roll back any of this, or do we need to get the Senate and the presidency too?
Well, by winning a majority in the Congress, we can slow things down. We can halt some of these things, but it is essential that we also win the Senate. The way things are going and the unpopularity of the bill suggests an opening for taking the Senate back, but it is a long shot. We have to defend more seats than will be available. But I think that when Americans learn about what's in this bill, they're going to be pissed off and they're going to be angry, just as people have turned out in some of the largest protests ever in our country. Over 5 million people took to the streets on No King's Day. We did a great job here in Chicago with over 75,000 people turning out. That's what will be needed, that and more. And of course, the fight in Congress to expose the shenanigans that are at play here through this big, ugly bill.
You know, in the Senate, there were a few people, Tillis, Murkowski, even the guy from Missouri. Some of them expressed some remorse, even if they didn't act it out. Do you sense that from anyone in the House? Are there a number of Republicans who you thought you maybe could switch their votes, or are they pretty much in lockstep?
Only 2 Republicans in the Senate voted against the big, ugly bill, mostly on the grounds of that it builds, it increases the deficit, the national debt by about $4 trillion so that the rich can become richer. And others who had misgivings about the bill and know the pain that is coming were much more afraid of Donald Trump than of the suffering that the bill will cause for millions of people across the country. So unfortunately, spines are on the other side of the aisle are hard to come by. But I think that as the protests continue, as people learn about the bill and its impact, they will come to regret this vote. And I think they will have been on the wrong side of history without a doubt.
I'm going to save the immigration until a little bit later. Right now, I want to turn to Gaza in the Middle East. About a week or two ago, you were one of 18 people out of 535 people in the House and the Senate who joined Rashida Tlaib in urging the Trump administration to stop supporting Israel's starvation of Gaza and the killing of hungry Palestinians. I wonder what your thoughts are on that only 18 of you signed that, and what you really think about where the Democratic Party stands around this. We have people, even Democrats now, being critical of the Democratic candidate in New York for the mayor. We have Democrats seeming to ignore the number of young people, voters that we need, who are very supportive of Palestine and sometimes don't vote because they're pissed off. Your take on all of that, how Gaza and the Middle East plays into the future of not only the nation, but the Democratic Party's politics.
I signed on to that letter, Michael, because I am ashamed of the role that we have played as a country in arming the Netanyahu government, which has committed the atrocious mass killings, indiscriminate murder of people in Gaza, of children, of women, the number of people that have been wounded and maimed, the number of amputees. This may be, it certainly is in the 21st century, the most catastrophic of events as it relates to war crimes being committed against a people, more casualties, for example, than another conflict that gets a lot of attention, and that's the Russian war against the Ukrainians. This shameful episode in Gaza should be eating at our conscience, at our heartstrings. The attacks on the people of Gaza need to stop. There are, of course, negotiations or a dialogue occurring in other countries to try to bring a ceasefire about. I called for a ceasefire the day after the initial attacks that occurred, almost 2 years ago, and it needs to come to an end. I also want to underscore that Pope Francis, before he died, was having nightly calls to a church in Gaza to get firsthand accounts of what was going on. And just like it drove him to take action and to speak out, so should more and more Americans. It is clear that there is not a military solution to the conflict in Gaza. Veterans of the Israeli Defense Forces, even politicians and supporters of the Netanyahu government have acknowledged that they're not going to wipe Hamas off the map, that the killing has gone too far, that the catastrophe is bad for the future of any type of peace in the Middle East, and that the conflict needs to end, that we need to stop bombing people, and that we need to open up the access to provide food and other humanitarian supplies to the suffering people of Gaza. We will continue to speak out on this, but I think that world opinion certainly calls for minimally those actions to be taken. And let's not forget that because of everything that has occurred and all the actions of the Netanyahu and the Israeli government, and of course our complicity in continuing to arm that government, that we are creating another generation that will be committed to resistance and to pushing back against the type of atrocities that families in Gaza and children in Gaza have experienced. So the time for a ceasefire is now. The time for opening up all channels so that aid can get in there is now. And I am proud to have signed that letter and will continue to advocate for that type of relief.
Chuy, given that situation in Gaza and the Democrats' ongoing support of the war in Gaza in some ways, what do you think the impact of that will be on future elections? And is there any discussion that you can share within the Democratic Party about how we handle that contradiction that's flying right in our face?
Well, it's very clear that for young people, young voters in particular, who have great empathy for the rights of Palestinians, who are very, very strongly opposed to the actions taken, the bombing, the indiscriminate bombings that have occurred in Gaza, that will continue to hurt the Democratic Party unless we take a more just position and demonstrate a real urgency to wanting to bring that conflict, if you could call it that, to an end and for a just solution. The rebuilding of Gaza, of course, but above all, ending the use of military force and the cutting off of food and medical assistance to the people of Gaza as a starting point for moving forward. And I also think, Michael, that the longer that this continues, the greater the potential instability in the Middle East will be. And the more isolated that the U.S. is going to become in the region.
I'm going to switch to immigration now and ICE. And, we've seen you trying to get in along with others into an ICE detention center and being refused entry, which is, I think, illegal. And then you were on the news recently talking about these masked ICE people. So I want to talk immigration, but I want to first read a quote from this wonderful book, Stealing Home. And it's about really clearing out Mexican-American communities in Los Angeles to build the home for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And in this book, which is by a guy named Eric Nussbaum, a lot of history between Mexico and the United States, he says during the Great Depression, Mexicans were scapegoated for everything from stealing jobs to mooching off federal benefits. Anti-Mexican and anti-immigration groups sprang up in Southern California. National organizations like the American Legion and Veterans of Foreign Wars supported deportations, as did some labor unions. Ultimately, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Mexicans in America, many of them natural-born U.S. citizens, were forced to over the border in a concerted effort at repatriation. In some Mexican neighborhoods in Los Angeles, immigration officials went door to door checking people's papers. So, does that remind you of today?
It certainly does, Michael. That was a very dark episode in our history during the Depression. There was a smaller repeat of that during the early 50s. When Operation Wetback was initiated as well, with the same type of anti-immigrant hysteria. And of course, that's what we see occurring in our country with a buildup of over the last 10 years. Donald Trump began his attack on immigrants by starting to denigrate Mexicans and Mexican Americans when he first announced his candidacy for the presidency in 2015, has never relented, and he's doubled down on those attacks. Now, of course, encompassing all immigrants, including Muslims and Arabs and people from especially global South countries with new versions of the Muslim ban. So all of this hysteria that has been created, the false narratives about criminality, about stealing jobs, about taking advantage of our system, providing health care, etc., are mostly overwhelmingly false, because most undocumented immigrants don't qualify for programs that they pay for. They contribute about $600 billion in taxes every year, federal, state, and local. They don't qualify for Social Security. They don't qualify mostly for Medicaid. And that has been the narrative around why we've got to kick people off of Medicaid, which has been just false and very unfortunate, because it's created this hysteria across the country that something is wrong, that there is rampant criminality, and that it's attributable to immigrants. None of that is borne out by the facts.
Do you think that what actually are things that we can do around ICE? And we have them running amok in the streets, busting people, marching through neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Chicago hasn't been quite as bad, although we had a guest recently who talked about the ICE seems to be moving to the suburbs here rather than the city. Give us a little bit on your take on ICE and what we might do to deal with ICE. First, in a current situation where we don't have any legislative power, and then later, perhaps when we do.
I think that continuing to push back, to protest, to videotape what is occurring, demonstrating the cruelty that is being inflicted on large numbers of people, the racial profiling that is grabbing and kidnapping people from streets, from institutions, people coming out of school, coming out of church, people going to work, people going shopping, I think are all instances. U.S. citizens being nabbed in this initiative, legal permanent residents as well, the separation of families. And it's really important for us to make the case that while immigrants are the priority for this dragnet by the Trump administration, that there is a real probability that it will extend beyond the immigrants. It's the immigrants today. It will be union workers. It will be labor people. It will be the LGBTQ community. It will be other groups in our society who demonstrated an opposition, a dissenting point of view to Trump's view of the country and of the world, that will be targeted next. The fact that you have masked agents, that you have masked agents refusing to identify themselves, even to members of the U.S. Congress, blocking our ability to do oversight, which is guaranteed by the laws that fund those facilities and those agencies and their budgets, is a clear sign that this administration is a lawless administration. They don't give a damn about the Constitution, and they will try to get away with everything possible while they fire the tens of thousands of government workers, whether it be in the Department of Labor, in the Environmental Protection Agency, in the Veterans Affairs Administration, in the Department of Transportation, on and on. This is about union busting. This is about trying to take control, absolute control of the government. And it's about having a dictator or a king in the White House. That's why everyone needs to resist, to speak out, and to continue to defend their constitutional rights while we fight, of course, in Congress, and while we step it up and show people what's really going on.
Well, Chuy, you did mention the No Kings marches. I was in El Paso for one there. You had 75,000 of our fellow Chicagoans here in Chicago, across the country. It was pretty wonderful. I did think that the press was a little minimal on it, but over a few days and a few stations, they did get the word out. But a lot of people, even though we were showing this force of people who care about the country and want it to be a place that's welcoming for all who already live here or who might come here, what do you think we got to tell people to do right now? demonstrations, make plans for the next election. How do we keep our spirits up? Are we just out there marching to keep our spirits up, or do you think that will lead us to something else?
I think the marches are essential to demonstrate to the larger American public what's at stake here. The big ugly bill and its impacts give us a bread and butter approach or opportunity to show people who runs this country and in whose interest the government is being operated. The rich, the military industrial complex, and while we dismantle departments, agencies of the government that are essential, those that provide food assistance, those that provide health care services and the funding for those things, student Pell Grants will be reduced as a result of this budget. I hadn't touched on that. There's a cap on how much students can borrow. There's a cap on how much students' parents, if they're fortunate to have parents willing to take out a loan, can borrow as well. This is very, very draconian. I think that as we break down the budget priorities of this administration, most people are apt to say, this isn't what I voted for. I wanted the cost of living to be addressed. I wanted us to talk about creating more job opportunities when we're, embarking on eliminating programs like the Job Corps, job training programs for young people in this country. This budget disinvests, it cuts funding for violence interruption programs in communities all over Chicagoland and in suburban communities and across the country as well. Cutting people off of food stamps is cruel. Nutrition programs in the schools are essential to children being able to learn, to have a good meal during the day. So there is a real rollback in things that are important. People recognize that climate change is one of the biggest threats to our world, certainly to our country and our economy. We're rolling back some of the most important investments that were made under the Biden administration in this field. We're even cutting funding from the National Weather Service, from public radio, from programs and information that's vital to communities, whether people live in rural America or in urban America. So I say the demonstrations are important. The continued lobbying, calling members of Congress, sharing with Republicans the impact of the bill that they voted for as continuing political education, economic education, real life education is really, really important. That's how we're going to build a movement that will rebuke what has occurred so far in our country. Because if you ask people, is this what you wanted? I think by far most people will say no, except for those who believe that immigration, is the greatest threat, that immigrants are really the problem in the country and what is making our country more unequal. But by and far, most people would be opposed to taking food, taking health care away from people, breaking unions, and getting rid of programs that help students, that help women, that help minorities continue in their progress. People don't want to see those things end. So I think that's what these demonstrations are about. But we also have to learn how to up our game on social media and communications so that people are getting a variety of sources of information that they make their decisions based on.
Chuy, one last question. You know, Mexico and the United States are right next to each other. A number of states, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Texas, California, used to be part of Mexico. There used to be in places like El Paso, it's called the Pass, people going north and south culturally, all kind of ways over many years. What can you say about the relationship between Mexico and the United States? Mexico has not only sent people to help with the floods in Texas. Mexico beat the U.S. in soccer the other night, and we have a situation where I heard on the radio just recently that 80% of the tomatoes and I think avocados too come from Mexico, and we're talking about big tariffs. What's your take on our relationships right now?
The relationship is a very long and rich one. It's full of conflict because the history is long. It involves military intervention at several times in Mexico's history. But it's critical to the future of both countries. Both countries should be pursuing an enrichment of the relationship, of working on both sides of the border, and the governments collaborating to the extent that they can to improve the lot of working people, of workers in Mexico, raising their living standards, raising their wages. Some important changes have occurred in Mexico, including in the labor sector with free elections taking place in Mexico. Auto workers in the U.S. and Mexico ought to be working together on those issues. Steel workers on both sides of the border should be working together. Truckers on both sides of the border should be working together as well. I'm going to be very involved in the review of the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. It used to be NAFTA. It was improved through the USMCA. Climate is not even mentioned in that agreement. I'd like to get it in that agreement. But again, the relationship needs to continue to flourish. The countries are interdependent, will continue to be interdependent. The auto parts that come from Mexico can be addressed through trade agreements. Certainly, our dependence on tomatoes, on avocados, on many other things that are essential to the livelihood of communities across the U.S. is also important. And let's not forget that Mexicans, for example, are one of the, living in the U.S., provide one of the most important sources of income and well-being for families and little villages and towns across Mexico in the form of remittances. They're being taxed a 1% tax in this big, ugly bill as a punishment, just to kind of put a cherry on top for Donald Trump's pleasure in this bill. But once again, there's a long history there. The relationship is rich. It needs to be nurtured. I'm looking forward to being in Mexico at the end of this month to continue to work with other progressive legislators and parliamentarians in Mexico and across the Americas to figure out an agenda for working people, an agenda for the poor, and an agenda of integrating both of our countries in a manner that's good for the people of both countries.
Chuy Garcia, I love it when I get to talk with you. I'm going to tell you to be safe as you drive off.
Yes, sir.
I know you'll be doing good in the world. Thanks a lot. Everybody else, stay tuned. We'll be right back with our next segment for Live from the Heartland for the week of July 11th.
And I just buckled up.